Bitcoin has properties that make it a sound money that really do ensure that it has that it is able to um, replicate basically what gold did for our ummah for hundreds, if not thousands, of years.
Even in the like worst periods of Islamic rulers, in the last years of Andalusia, for example, the Islamic dinar was still 100% pure, and and like this shows how important and like how severe this issue is.
I want people to be able to understand things in the simplest way possible, as well as being able to be entertained by the rabbit holes and the
Yeah,
by the all the tangents that we can go on. But it's important to sometimes bring it back to basics, I guess.
yeah, I think yeah. Last time we had deeper conversation, and maybe people did not quite follow how this is also all connected.
Mm.
And also with our in our meeting with brother Abdullah, I think from the reactions I saw for people who are not so well informed about Bitcoin, they don't not these kind of conversations could help them, but they don't provide this introductory um, base ground for them.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It's I feel like it's probably easy to feel that way if you are maybe struggling to grasp the fundamentals, or like you can hear some brothers like ourselves talk who've like are really firm in our understanding and belief of something in particular. And sometimes it can be difficult because you forget to explain it in a way that the person that you were many years ago could understand if they were hearing this maybe for the first time, or they had been hearing all sorts of different things about this thing that we're talking about,
Yeah,
and therefore what we're saying maybe sounds a bit ludicrous or a bit far fetched or a bit silly. So
yeah.
I think we can, yeah. I mean, where do we start? Let's. I mean, for I think for any Muslim who really wants to understand Bitcoin and why we think and talk about it the way that we do, for me, I think it comes down to the fundamentals about what we're taught in Islam about how we conduct ourselves financially as a society, the things that we should prioritize, how we conduct ourselves in trade and exchange. I think there's many verses in the Quran about uh, just weights and measures. We are told in the Quran and the Hadiths about the severity of riba, and there are many examples throughout the Sunnah of how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to conduct himself as one, a businessman, as a trader, how those relationships were structured in terms of the trade that he would embark on. It wasn't debt based. It was never debt based. It was always equity based. And there's also many stories there about some really fundamental things like what can be used as money, what is an acceptable exchange. It is not okay to exchange uh, the same quantity of a particular item for exactly the same quantity but of a low of a worse quality of the same
Mhm.
item. This is a form of riba,
In the
and
form of theft.
yeah, and a form of theft. Exactly. We have so many stories like this, and of course I'm summarizing a lot of them because if we were to go into detail on all of them, one, I'm not knowledgeable enough to tell the exact story word of word off the top of my head, but two, Equally, we could be here for many hours if we went into each one individually. But there's many examples from the Sunnah, from the Quran about these things. Um, and it's very clear. Like if you go and examine our Deen and the teachings of it through a lens of finances, through a lens of how we are to conduct ourselves financially, economically, in trade and exchange, and even at a societal level, the things that we're told to prioritize. Ultimately, it's low time preference, so delayed gratification, um, essentially prioritizing the akhirah, right, and not getting consumed in the here and now, and always having that thought towards the future, to the thing that's really going to last. And in
Can we maybe elaborate a little bit about this low time preference thing? Because this is a concept that is not so well understood.
Yeah,
It should be, because in the Quran there's so many uh, verses that talk about al-ajila, and that uh, um, Muslims and believers should always have a long time view on things, and they should not be in a hurry
yeah,
to in the dunya. So
yeah.
why do the Bitcoiners always talk about this concept, though they never read the Quran?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoiners talk about low time preference because the phrase low time preference is coined by Austrian economists, and especially, which is a very popular economic school of thought amongst Bitcoiners, because it talks about the importance of having money that cannot be diluted and debased. It's a very central part of that economic theory. Um, and having money that is essentially hard in that way, like gold. And
Not,
the
I mean, this is not now um, um, clear for someone who doesn't know about Austrian economics, like what you are talking about, right?
yeah,
Like, why does sound money? Why is it related to not being in a hurry?
yeah. So this is where it comes from, right? The the concept of low time preference is essentially the delaying of gratification today for something better in the future, right?
Mhm.
And we know this is not just an economic thing, but we've all heard the stories, about like the marshmallow experiment with the kids, where the kids who delayed the gratification and didn't take the marshmallow, on average, ended up being more successful in their later life. I know this has been disputed by others since, and there's been, many will say that this is not accurate. Fine, okay. I think it's pretty evident that if you observe the reality, that people who delay gratification end up benefiting from that. Delaying gratification, foregoing from an economic sense, in what we call low time preference, is essentially just that. Low time preference is, at a societal level as well as at an individual level, is rather than rather than being obsessed with consumption of today, spending everything that you can to enjoy as much as you can today, because perhaps you are uncertain about the future. Uh, People tend that's what we call a high time preference, right? A high time preference is where people prioritize today and the immediate. So it's like the opposite of delaying gratification. So why might a person raise their time preference, and why might a person not be willing to delay gratification? So the primary reasons for that would be uncertainty about the future, and uncertainty about the future could stem from many different things. um, Uncertainty about the future could come from, perhaps someone lives in a lawless society, where even if they did have the um, even if they did have the initiative to want to perhaps save some wealth or forego some immediate consumption to build something in the future, to save up for something, perhaps the environment that they're in just won't facilitate that. It won't be friendly to that because maybe there's a high chance of theft. They don't have somewhere safe and secure to store their wealth. So just that environmental element, and perhaps lack of safety, lack of security, lack of protection for private property, that could drive someone to just consume it today, because what's the point? There's maybe a 50% chance that what I have today will last me until next year before someone steals it. So I'm just going to spend it today. Then
Maybe it's also a lack of patience.
it could be a lack of patience as well, of course.
People who don't want to make a family and then just want to engage in zina, they just want the gratification now, and they don't see like a benefit in building a family and having a wife for 50
Yeah,
years and having children and stuff. But
of course.
yeah, but they forego this benefit of having this satisfaction on a long term. They want just satisfaction now,
Yes, the
and they
satisfaction of immediate pleasures.
yeah
Yeah, but
yeah
what makes it, what drives a person to be in that mindset, right? So
yeah
if it's um in that particular example, the person who commits zina today in pursuit of short-term pleasures, there maybe that doesn't prevent them from starting a family and having a wife down the line. It may be in a society that deems that stuff, that is that actually has morals, it has morals, and it cares about decency, then yes, maybe it would make it difficult for that person to have a family and children later in life. But ultimately, the person who would resist zina and who would fight against the urges for immediate pleasure is the person who has faith in something much further into the future. You're talking about someone who has low time preference, who is willing to delay the gratification of this life for the next life. That, for me, that's the ultimate expression of low time preference. That's the belief in a creator and in an afterlife. So that is like that's the ultimate form of delaying your gratification. It is
yeah
foregoing the things that seem like they will give you satisfaction now, even though you know that they will harm you in the future, in the
yeah
akhirah, in the for eternity.
yeah.
This is the best example of low
And
time
the
preference.
confusion now comes by uh, most of the Muslims or and non-Muslims. So when you start talking about that as a Bitcoiner, they are totally confused because actually they are there in Bitcoin and in crypto because they want to make money fast, right?
Yeah,
And then you come and say, no, it's about sound money and it's about low time preference. So, but can you show the listeners or explain how is low time preference related to Bitcoin and how is that related to sound money?
sure. It comes back to a question that you asked me earlier, which I didn't answer properly. So let me answer that, because, um, like I said, the term low time preference is essentially just delaying your gratification, and in the way that I've just explained, there's many ways a person can do that. They could do it economically. They could do it, in terms of like sacrificing the dunya for the akhirah. These are different ways of lowering one's time preference and delaying gratification. So but the term of low time preference became popularized from an economic school of thought called Austrian economics, which was very much based around having a form of money that held its value over time. And the way that money holds its value over time is it's hard to create more of it, right? So we know that if we look at, we don't have to look far. We can all look at what has happened to us over the last 5 to 10 years. What has happened is a massive, massive increase in the supply of money, the quantity of money around the world. Trillions and trillions of new dollars have been created by central banks around the world. when that new money is increased, there's more and more money, and unfortunately, it goes to people who tend to hold the most wealth already. But this is besides the fact. The fact is, society now has many more units of money, and on the other side of that equation is goods and services. Goods and services does when you print more money, you do not print goods and services. They cannot be conjured out of nothing into thin air. In order to produce goods and services, people have to start up businesses. They have to save up. They have to delay some gratification to invest into a business venture that is going to allow them to produce products and services for society. You can't just suddenly, even existing businesses cannot just suddenly double their rate of production. You know, um, people cannot go and suddenly dig up double the amount of lithium for their batteries or double of the amount of gold for their electronic circuit boards. So the money the amount of money grows, the goods and services barely grows. You have more money now chasing after more goods and services. So the only balancing out that can happen here is that the price of these goods and services has to rise to match the amount of new money that exists. Okay, so this is of course what happens when a money it's easy to create the form of money that everyone uses.
And it
And
is something new, right? It's not something uh, that is part of capitalism as like throughout the history. Never we had uh, this situation that we have now that money can be printed without limits.
yeah, not never to this degree. We've had episodes of fiat money in history, um, but because we've had situations where gold historically as the gold has always been what people know to be actual real money that exists there underneath all the paper. If you can hold some of the gold, you know you're protecting yourself by all these paper games that a government might play, right? And there's so many examples of this in history. Every empire has done it. The British did it, the Dutch did it, the French did it. They have all, in some form, engaged in the issuance of fiat money and printing of more money than there was real money in the form of gold. And it has all ended the same way. This is undisputed in history. Every
That's the way. You
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, so every single fiat currency in history has failed, and every
Right.
single country that has engaged in the printing of fiat currency and the dilution of uh, its citizens' savings and purchasing power has ended up collapsing. Every empire has folded.
Yeah. So what you want to say is that capitalism is about low time preference. That means that I uh, save so in order to have capital, right? So
Yes,
I delay the immediate gratification. I do not spend all the money and have on the pleasures that I want to have now. I say I delay these pleasures for later and engage in accumulating capital
yeah,
so that I have a project. I can open a project, for example, and then this will lead to an income that is stable and I'm not in debt. So I am a capitalist when I am not in debt and I have saved money for my project. And but this needs good form of money where I can store my my energy or my income or what I did in my life in a form of in a medium that keeps this energy
yes,
and doesn't cannot be diluted.
yes, yeah. And
So
I think
is it that disconnection or do you want to elaborate it in another way?
this is correct, and this is the connection, and this is I think we've spoken about capitalism before and the misconception, particularly amongst Muslims, about what capitalism is. What we have today is not capitalism by its textbook definition. You could argue that we maybe have never really seen true capitalism in its pure form, what we have seen is maybe in periods of time. I personally believe that we saw it in early Islam. I believe we saw it in an extremely pure and perfect form, where you had. I mean, I won't go into it too much, but I believe that's it perfectly manifested. Um,
Yeah.
and if it helps for people not to call that capitalism, then that's fine. We can call it prophetic trade, prophetic economics. But
Mhm.
ultimately, that's what it was. And like you say, the whole purpose of capitalism at its root is for one to lower their time preference, and say, rather than use my income to consume today, right? I'm going to forego some consumption. I'm going to maybe I have enough income that I can eat half a pound of beef a day. Okay, I'm going to reduce it. I'm going to have a quarter a pound of beef a day for a few months, right? And I'm going to forego that little bit extra satisfaction and pleasure that I was getting from that extra bit of beef for a number of months so that I can save up the capital that is going to allow me to start my own farm. Start my own farm. I like beef. I know what other beef eaters like. I know what makes good quality beef. So I'm going to deploy that capital. I'm going to invest in a farm, and I'm going to turn that into a profitable business. That's my goal when I go into a capitalist venture. Now, that process there of lowering my time preference and foregoing that consumption meant that I was able to save money. It meant that I didn't have to take on debt to start my business, and it meant that I could one my foregoing of consumption not only is going to benefit me if my business is a success, inshallah, but for everyone who lives around me now, that I'm going to start a farm, right? So I'm going to bring more quality beef to the market, and what that should do is, by bringing more quality beef to the market, it introduces more competition in the market for beef. And competition, if you are competing as sellers, you are competing for buyers. There is only two ways that you can compete to get more buyers. Either you provide a much superior product, superior quality, better quality beef, or you force prices down. You make your operations more efficient. You find a better way of producing the same quality beef for a lower price for your consumers. Um, now, so there is societal benefit as well, and you see there the lowering of prices for consumers or the increasing of quality available to consumers is the ultimate benefit that happens when people engage in that process of capitalistic production, which is just the delaying of gratification, saving up of capital, deploying that capital into a method of production that takes longer than it would to consume, to live hand to mouth. It's to engage in a longer process of production.
Now, like the problem is that we are so much educated in our current so-called capitalistic way of life. So most of people will say to you, will tell you, and no, I don't have to save. I can get a loan from a bank and open this project. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't even actually has to be a project. I mean, you can lower your time preference and invest in yourself,
Yes.
in some skill or in your education
Yes.
to get a better income. So, but even there, people are taking loans to uh, to finance that. So
Yes.
why is that bad?
Yeah. So if you, one of the main things that people should have picked up on from everything I just said was that two things really. I'm delaying gratification for a certain period of time, and during that time, I'm going to save up my income, my excess income, so that I can use it later to start a business. And the other thing I said was that the introduction of more competition into the market for beef should drive the price of beef down for everyone in the community. So those two things can only happen if the money that society operates on holds its value, right? I can only forego consumption for a long period of time and save up money that I know is going to be able to afford me what I need to be able to start my business if I can be assured that my money is going to, at the very least, preserve purchasing power. So that I can make a calculation. I can say, okay, I need to forego consumption for X amount of months, and I will be able to save this much, and by then that will buy me X amount. Okay, if money was suddenly if the government was to suddenly increase the money supply by 10%, well, that has just thrown my whole calculation out of the window. Okay, the other part there is that in order for the prices to fall for everyone to benefit from this increased competition in the market for beef, again, the money has to hold its value, because if the money if the money didn't hold its value, the money in this equation has to be a static value at the very least, so that the prices can fall against it. If you have money working in the opposite direction, right? If the money is losing value faster than you can drive the price of beef down, then actually the price of beef is going to rise. Okay, so those are the two very important things. So
So that's why everything is getting more expensive and having less quality.
exactly, this is why
So
because
this is not the natural thing to happen.
this is not. It would be natural that human productivity would cause prices to fall, right?
Yeah.
So that would be deflation. Deflation would be natural through productivity. That's not to say that prices can never rise. Prices could suddenly rise because perhaps there was a flood that wiped out 50% of the farms in the town, and there's suddenly a shortage of supply. These
Yeah.
things can happen, but the trend over time, due to human productivity against a monetary unit that cannot be just arbitrarily created out of thin air, is that prices of everything should fall. And the reason I wanted to revisit that point and just stress that point is because it helps me to answer your question about why what people might say is that, well, I don't need to save to start my business. I can just go get a loan to start the business.
Mhm.
Okay, you can. What would be a more Islamic way of funding your business there would be to take your wits and your know how and your knowledge and your exciting business idea that you believe you have good insight on and you believe you can execute on, and go and find a owner of capital. Go and find someone with wealth who will invest in you and your idea, and you can both share in the risk and share in the profit of that venture. That would
Yeah.
be an Islamically aligned way of funding your business. That's equity based financing. And equity based financing is great because there's real capital at risk, which means you have to make real calculations. Because if you decide, you cannot just burn through cash endlessly before until something just sticks and throw ideas at the wall, or just, you know, both the investor and you as the entrepreneur are very invested in the success of this thing. You're going to be cautious. You're going to put a lot of time and effort and thinking and detail into deciding what is the product you're going to bring to market, what's the strategy that you're going to use to bring it to market, who's your target audience. What we have today, from this mindset of I'll just borrow, I'll just borrow money, pay it back with interest to fund my business idea. The problem with this is that by its very definition of what I've just described, of what capitalism is in its truest sense, and by capitalism, I just mean that lowering of the time preference, saving of capital, deploying of capital into ventures, into entrepreneurship, into improving your own skills. Capital does not need to be money, it can be time, it can be human capital. Okay? So if in this scenario now, what I just described of capitalism, it can only work. It can only work if the money holds its value. If you cannot just arbitrarily create more units of the money, if it's really hard to make more of, right? Now, how does that work if people take on debt? Okay, I've got a business idea now. Rather than me going and finding an investor who believes in my vision and who is willing to put trust in me and executing on that vision, I'm just going to say, well, I'll go to a bank, I'll take £50,000 off them and I will pay it back at 10% interest. Okay, now I've got my £50,000. Great, I've got my startup capital for my business. Now, in order for me to pay back my £50,000 plus 10% interest, What's very important for people to understand is that in this system, the bank did not the bank did not take £50,000 cash that it had in its vaults and give it to me. It created it out of thin air. Okay, that's how money comes into existence. Banks create money out of nothing in the form of loans. So there's the £50,000 that they've created out of thin air. I'm expected to repay that back, but I'm also expected to, and that money now exists. That money now exists. The fiat paper money now exists, £50,000 worth. It can be paid back because I could just take it right now if I wanted to in cold hard cash, and I could give it straight back to the bank, and that would be cancelled out. However, it wouldn't be cancelled out because there's 10% interest on top. And that 10% interest did not get created. The bank did not create that 10% interest. Okay. That means that at some point, I have to find an extra £5,000 from somewhere to pay the bank back that doesn't exist. Okay. Now, I've decided to finance my business in this way. Great. I've got my startup capital. Maybe my business is really successful and it returns me 20% a year. So I actually make some profit. I'm able to pay the bank back. This is great. Okay. But what you've introduced is a system where now, if you think about how did I make a 20% uh, profit on my business venture? Maybe I made 20%. That's pretty good, right? My whole concept of being able to pay the bank back easily, right, relies on what I should really hope that the value of money does not increase in that time span that I need to pay the bank back, right? Because one, in order for me to pay the bank back, I've had to go and find that extra money from somewhere. If what I was doing was genuinely productive and others around me were also engaged in productive business, then we should be driving the costs of everything down. Okay. That would mean that for me to pay back my £50,000 plus interest with with prices falling, I'm going to have to pay back more in real terms, right? The very introduction of debt as a mechanism of financing is completely contradictory to this model of capitalism that requires a form of money that can't be debased in order to succeed, in order for prices to fall. Once you introduce debt as the financing mechanism to business, which is basically the default financing mechanism for businesses in all capitalist societies, so-called capitalist societies, we should call it Western crony capitalism is probably the better suited name for it. Debt is the default financing mechanism. Debt comes with interest on top. Let's say in my business idea, okay, let's expand it a bit actually, because I didn't paint the complete picture there. I managed to make £20,000 profit. I managed to pay the bank back. Great. Where did that £20,000 come from? But more importantly, where did the £5,000 of interest come from that I paid them back? Because, like we said, the bank created £50,000. The £5,000 must have come from somewhere. Now, if there was a very small, let's talk about this in a small economy. There's very few people and businesses in there. In order for me to pay that money back to the bank, I've had to extract £5,000 out of the economy and give it to the bank to pay off the interest. If if the bank has funded some other businesses in the economy through the same financing mechanism of debt, they also have to pay back 10% on top of what they borrowed. If I have just taken £5,000 of what would be interest to be paid to the bank out of the economy, how are they going to pay back the bank? Those other businesses, I've taken it out of the economy. And in order for them to find it, they have to go and find it from someone else. Now, the last thing the bank wants in this scenario is for the borrowers to start defaulting, because if the borrowers start defaulting, it causes a credit collapse, which we've seen before. Anyone who's been alive in the last, well, anyone who was old enough to remember the year 2008 will know what a credit collapse looks like. Okay. Now, if in order to pay back my interest, I've had to suck out £5,000, that is £5,000 those other businesses can't get their hands on, which means one of them, at least one of them is going to have to default if they can't find the money from someone else. You know, there is, and now the only way that every single business in this economy can continue to borrow from the bank and pay back the bank with interest is that the bank must just continue to create more and more new money with interest on top that is never going to it's never going to exist, actually, right? It's just going they're going to have to create new money so that so that someone can pay back someone else who can pay back the bank the interest, and this is a cycle that keeps continuing. In order to make sure that that person doesn't default, the bank lends to another person who becomes the customer of that first person, so that they can pay the interests of the first person's loan so that they can pay back the bank. You compound this over the century that it's been happening, really. I know we left the gold standard in 1971, and this is when kind of nations all around the world were able to print as much money as they wanted. But it's been happening long before that, really. It's been happening since the 1930s when Roosevelt confiscated the Americans' gold and completely devalued the dollar against gold. You know, it's been happening this whole time. It happened in 1914 during World War One when the Bank of England the Bank of England was the worst money printing of all, because they just hit the print button on a printer, and there was no financial engineering. They just printed more money, and they didn't even try. You know, there's a big cover up there that people should read into. But this has been happening. You compound this process over a century, essentially. And just imagine now the amount of interest that has added up that hasn't will never exist. It will never exist. This is the amount of money that must be paid back. It's debt that exists in the economy that is owed to someone. And here's the amount of actual real money. The compounding effect of this more and more debt being issued out of thin air with interest, with the riba, continuously over a century and longer, and it just compounds and if anyone's ever looked at a chart of what compounding growth does to anything, a modest 4 to 5% a year, which I can tell everyone now is half at least of what they've been creating every year for the last century, would you would see a hockey stick trend like that. Yeah. And it's so much worse. I can't remember the exact figure, but I believe the quantity of money, i.e., the M2 money supply in the world versus actual money, essentially the debt outstanding versus the quantity of actual money that can be used to pay it back, the mismatch is so huge that if everyone tried to pay back their debts at once, I don't even think we would get maybe 20% of the way through everyone clearing their debts before we actually ran out of money and
Wow.
the entire system collapsed. And I appreciate I've gone on a bit of a tangent there, but I just wanted to illustrate how once you start introducing debt with riba as the financing mechanism, it absolutely destroys a society. And because what we've seen there is you introduce a system where borrowing must just constantly continue in order for the previous person to be able to pay back the previous person's loan, and it's a vicious cycle. It's just layers and layers and layers. Now, what does this do to the people and the businesses? This is the important thing, right? So here we had that model of, and no matter what anyone wants to say, this is the model for me that early Islam was built on economically. It was built on people nurturing and preserving capital, deploying that capital in ways that were beneficial to society, and society flourished under this model. And societies have every single society that has operated on a sound money, and by sound money we mean a money that is hard to create more of. Every single society has flourished under that standard. Okay, um, the
And
Islamic society flourished the most because it also benefited from the Sharia, which kept society in a great way. It helped the society to remain free of some of the things that plague us today. Um, and this model, as we know, so as we've seen, this model that encourages investment in things that are beneficial to society, whether or not you're doing it for the benefit of society, by you preserving your capital, by you nurturing capital, by you investing in longer production processes, by you saving money and foregoing consumption to invest for the future, for future profits, you are increasing productivity at a societal level. You are introducing competition for goods that drives prices down. Okay, this is beneficial, and that what that does to the behavior of people is the more people are doing that in a society, and the more that costs are being driven down over time, the more a person is able to plan for the future. We go back to what we were talking about as to what would prevent someone from wanting to defer consumption today or to lower their time preference or to delay gratification. It would be uncertainty in the future. It would be that thought of not knowing if what they have today is going to last into the future. Will it buy them more, or is it going to be devalued in the space of 5 years? Therefore, I might as well just use it all now. Well, if the prices are falling everywhere because productivity is driving them down, and you've got a solid monetary unit that holds its value, you are incentivized to actually, well, hang on, maybe me not splash out on that thing that's going to make me happy for just a few days. Maybe what I do is I put some money aside and really save up for that thing that I wanted. Maybe I save up and I buy my parents a house because they've been renting for their whole lives and they deserve a home of their own. Maybe what I'm really passionate about is I'm passionate about education. So I'm going to save some money, and what I really want to do is I want to build an education center, okay? And I can do that, right? Because as the cost of everything is falling as well, less of your money has to go towards your day-to-day needs anyway, your immediate wants and needs. And it allows you to allocate more to the future. It allows you to think about things beyond your immediate survival. And this this spreads out into a whole society.
And we have to add maybe that when the bank creates money through giving a loan, uh, and me being uh, part of this process, we are both, the bank and me, we are engaging in theft, as I understand, because we are devaluing every holder of the currency that we are printing, right?
Yeah,
So it's not just the fault of the bank, it's also the fault of me as an individual when I go and take a loan. So it's here where I understand riba and why it's forbidden, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
And so it's not just a moral religious question. It's also something that will not have a good effect on your business, because you are you have to pay back the money, and usually it's a big stress factor in your company. You don't have, and defaulting for a month or 2 months will create big penalties and cause bigger problems, and so many people who engaged in this form of financing were very much stressed, and they had eventually to lower the quality and raise the prices of the goods that they are selling in order to break even, or make a little bit of profit. That half of it will be taken by the government through taxation, and the other half will be taken to the big banks and the investors of.
absolutely. This
So
is the thing.
yeah, so it's not a healthy way to make business. When you have a partner who's sharing risk, you can engage him. You can show him that what's the problems. He may be patient with you and give you a permission to pay later back. And there's like this human side of the of things. So but like the theft thing is very important because to I don't know if you can elaborate on it a little bit more.
Yeah,
How is it theft?
yeah. I mean, you could put it quite simply in this in sense that let's say that let's say that you worked for an employer, okay, and you went to your employer and you said, "Look, I just want you to pay me a little bit more, okay? I want you to increase my pay this month by 10%." And your employer turns around to you and says, "We can do that for you, but it will unfortunately, in us doing that, what it will do is we're going to have to create some more tokens to pay you in." And when we do that, it's going to make everyone else's tokens worth less. They're not going to be able to buy as much food. They're not going to be able to, some of them will not be able to afford their rent this month, but you will get your pay rise. You will
He
get
will
the
not
thing that
tell
you
you
need.
that, but he will do it, right?
Yeah. But
If he's
if
if
you
he's
knew,
using tokens.
yeah, if he's, yeah, well, this is it. So, but whatever it is that you're, so this imaginary employer is paying you in, if you said to them, look, if knowingly, you know, you know this now. Okay, if I accept this thing here, it's going to take from the ability of everyone else here that I work with to be able to afford their bills, to be able to afford their food, to be able to afford their everything, to be able to save for the things that they want in life. Okay, if I knowingly accept that offer from my employer has stolen from those people and I have stolen from those people. You know, you haven't physically taken something from them, but you have taken the purchasing power of their money, and that is just as bad as stealing the physical money. It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
it's a brilliant way to steal, you know.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
it. It's a method that's been used by uh, rulers and those in power for many centuries, on many occasions throughout history, to silently tax their population. This is the ultimate form of tax, and it's so sadistic and it's so clever because nobody really notices it. Because
The older form is it of this one or of this method is that they were mixing other metals
yes,
into the coins, right?
yes,
But like for history, the golden dinar, even in the like worst periods of Islamic rulers, in the last years of Andalusia, for example, the Islamic dinar was still 100% pure, and and like this shows how important and like how severe this issue is. You know, it's a big issue. It's as you said, and this always I use this uh, argument to talk about Bitcoin. It's about the right measures.
this is it.
When the measures are pure and standardized, this is it. This is practicing the commands of the prophets throughout history. Most of them were talking about not stealing and not uh, uh, um, diluting or manipulating the measures.
Yes, yes, this is it. We have this should just tell Muslims how important it is that in all of Islamic society they maintained a money that did not get diluted, that maintained its purchasing power. And any of the Islamic rulers and caliphates and leaders who did engage in the debasement of money, we saw very quickly what happened to their caliphate. We saw this is how the Ottomans eventually collapsed. They began debasing coinage. They began taking on debt and riba, and very quickly things fell apart. What was a society of the Ottomans where the Waqf system was everywhere throughout the Ottoman Empire, providing for people, for all of their needs all throughout their life. Once they turned to the debasement of money and they turned to taking on the riba, and that whole model that I described earlier of the only way once you introduce interest-bearing debt into the equation is this endless cycle of having to issue more, and people it's just a grabbing. It's everyone trying to grab so that they can pay off the looming debt and their interest payments. It's
Yeah.
just everyone trying to stop their part of the house of cards from collapsing. And what that introduces is, you look at the Ottomans, it was on sound money. It was not indebted. It had the Waqf system everywhere, providing for its citizens. They started debasing the coinage. They started taking on debt. In order to pay back the debt, you have to keep debasing the coinage as a silent tax. When things get really bad, the Waqf system that was protected by law for centuries, it's not just protected by law, it's protected by Allah. This is the Sharia, okay, for the protection of the Waqf. And they turned these things, these public endowments into, well, they're private endowments, but they were welfare endowments. They started extracting from them. They started changing the laws around the Waqf. They started taxing the Waqf. It essentially just got squeezed, as all things do in every society that embarks down this path. Is they just start squeezing and squeezing everything that they can out of it, and eventually it collapses. And that right there just shows you. And you compare that to the other historic Islamic civilizations. There's so many examples of where did they stuck to the sound money because it was so important. And we really see what happens when it gets abandoned. But I just wanted to the reason that I want to make that really clear to Muslims is that this is fundamentally the reason why those of us who believe Bitcoin is so important for our ummah. This is like probably the most fundamental reason why, is because we look at how important sound money was to the Muslims, that for centuries and centuries they did not debase that coinage because they knew what that meant for them, right? If they were to debase that coinage, they were participating in riba. It's a form of riba. To that mechanism of, if you remember, there's two types of riba. The one riba is to give a loan and receive back interest. Yeah, this is the riba. The other form of riba is where you take something of a certain quality and quantity, and you exchange it for the same quantity of lower quality, the same item but different quality. Or you exchange the same item, a bag of dates. I exchange one bag of dates for another, and one is more dates in it than the other. Okay, these are forms of riba. Yeah. So, and riba is one of the seven destroyers. It is one of the greatest sins in the Quran. The way it is talked about in the Quran and the Sunnah is like nothing. You are not going to find many things talked about in this way. Allah and His Messenger declare war on the person who engages in riba, right? So
Yeah.
then you start to see, well, okay, the early Muslims, of course, they would avoid messing with the money, of introducing unjust measures, of engaging in a riba. Because if you think about what happens when you debase a money, when a government is printing money, when banks print money, central banks, commercial banks, when they create more money, they're taking, let's just take a £10 note. I put my £10 note in the bank, and a year later I receive the same £10 note back, but it's not worth £10 anymore. It's now worth, in real terms, it's worth £8, because I can only buy £8 worth of goods with it anymore, right?
Yeah.
So what they have done is they have taken something from, there is an exchange has just happened in which I have exchanged the same fungible item for the same fungible item back, but of a lesser quality, and that is riba. And this is what you would do if you were engaging in the debasement of people's money. You're engaging in riba. That's the way I always understood it. That's the way that it was very clearly understood. To me, it was very clear that, well, this is why there was so much focus on sound money in Islam, is because it really is a matter of faith. And we know why it's so important as well. It is everything that we're told to do in the Quran, everything in the Quran and the Sunnah, there is wisdom in it. Okay. And we may not, we are mere humans and we do not know. I mean, we know now the second and third order consequences of some of these things, but Allah knows best. And Allah, look, He told us to do not engage in riba, and He warned us about all the things that it can cause. And now you see it today. You see what happens when you stray from from maintaining the soundness of money, maintaining just measures, maintaining fairness in exchange. And as you start, the further you go away from that, the worse and worse things get. It's one thing leads to another. That that model of nurturing capital and the benefit that it has on a broader society, on lowering the time preference of all of society, of making it easier for everyone into society to delay gratification. Instead, now you have a mechanism where, and one other thing, Bashara, you made a good point about what debt-based financing in business does to incentives. Okay, now my incentives as a business owner, I'm constantly in fear because I have to pay the interest, and maybe I've had be a bad year, maybe it's been a bad year of trading. We've gone from an Islamic model of economics and financing of business, which is capital based. Okay, it's venture based. It's you find an investor and they share in the upside with you, and you both share the risk of the business venture. They're now invested in your success. They will, like you say, they might say to you, you know what, it's been a tough year, but I know this is a good business, so don't worry about having to give me my, let's work something out to get us through this year. Yeah, we've gone from that, a system of partnership, a system of cooperation, and we go to this debt-based financing model. What we've now gone to is a system of predator and prey. The person giving the loan, the bank giving the loan, they don't really care if your business succeeds, because at the end of it, they get their money back and they legally get to repossess whatever they want in order to get back their principal plus the interest that they're paid. You're a guaranteed cash cow for them. They have no interest in the success of your business. Okay. And this, what does this do to you? This is not a nice position to be in. Perhaps your business was something that you were passionate about, something that you thought offered real value to society. Well, now you're just worrying about, how can I make enough money to get these guys off my back, to get these vultures off my back? And what is that going to do to your business model and to the product that you're giving to your customers? You're going to unfortunately have to make a decision, which is, I just need to money grab here, which means I need to either lower the input costs, use worse ingredients, worse materials, or I need to raise prices. These are all forms of inflation, right? Inflation materializes in increasing prices, reducing quality, or the other one is shrinkflation, where I will sell the same product, but maybe we'll cut the weight by 25%. People won't notice. But ultimately, what you're doing is, now your business is just going into survival mode. You're going into survival mode. Look at the incentives as they start to spread out across a society. Okay. Now, the business owner who is no longer engaged in a cooperative partnership with an investor and is now engaged with a vulture who is just preying on their downfall, they now have to sacrifice what was important to them. And as a result, they are now providing worse products, or they are raising prices on their customers.
Yeah.
What does that do to their customers? Well, their customers that were now used to buying their products, they're finding that the products break every 3 months now instead. So now, they're having to pay more frequently to get the same uses, or the prices have risen, and now they're having to forego consumption on something else. what does this do to the person, right? The person who is supposed to be able to delay gratification and save for the future. Well, they can't do it as much anymore because not has only this business owner done it, but every business owner that is in business with the vultures at the bank is now in this same vicious cycle. Okay. And the thing is, if and you expand these incentives, so we see what the incentives does to the business owner, to the entrepreneur, and to the effect that they have on their consumers. We see what impact it has on the consumers. This is now taking up that suddenly the cost of the consumer's immediate wants and needs is risen. That means more needs to be start being allocated in terms of their income to the present, and less is being allocated to the future. Okay, they can't afford the house anymore. They maybe can't afford as many holidays. This is what happens slowly, slowly, slowly. It happens. Before you know it, the wife's got to go to work full time now as well. The kids, we don't have time to do all the things we wanted to do with them. Let the school take them for 7 hours a day. Um,
It's not
maybe
all,
we,
now also, like if you ask anyone, why are the prices rising, he will tell you like so many things that he heard in the radio or television or at school. That yeah, it's because there are too many people on Earth, or that Putin invaded Ukraine, or Hormuz is closed, or Trump went crazy, and this and that. They like the whole educational media system that we live in gives you answers for why things are that way they are now.
yeah,
And this is like the really satanic part of the issue, that you don't like the it's a kind of taking the people en masse, into a system, into believing that the system is the way it is because of this and that, and how you can, uh, deceive people to not to see the cause of it.
yeah,
This is really like a master work of Satan, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, but now the other part of this satanic manipulation is to cover up what is Bitcoin about. That Bitcoin is sound money, and
hmm
it's not just a token that is created out of thin air on computer. Why can you explain why is Bitcoin sound money? Like most of the people will say no, it's like just paper money and but in form of digital.
yeah. So I just wanted to finish up one thing at the end quickly, which just
Mm,
before I move on to that, which is that,
yeah.
like you mentioned, it's there's always a reason for why the prices must go up. Okay, but you look at those examples that you gave. Okay, this Russia did this, Trump did that, this happened here. Ask anyone who tells you that. This is for anyone listening. Anytime someone tells you that, maybe it's a professor at your university. Ask them, well, why does it cause the prices to go up and then stay there? Why don't they drop down afterwards? After
Yeah.
maybe once Trump stops being crazy, why don't the prices come back down? Right? Okay. Well, then they'll tell you, maybe they'll say that that's when maybe they'll get a little bit more honest with you. Maybe they'll say, well, actually we need the prices to keep rising. Like, we need it because otherwise, if they didn't rise, people would stop spending. They would stop
Yeah.
spending. This is my favorite one of all. They will say people will stop spending because what they're it's basically saying there is they're saying, if we don't steal from people, they won't buy our crappy products, which makes you question the quality of half of the things that drive GDP in our economy. Would anyone even choose to buy this crap if their money wasn't a melting ice cube in their hand? And the answer is probably no. And that's what the whole Western economy is built on. It's just this ridiculous cycle of stealing from people so that they continue to buy your crap, right?
Did I tell you about my AI conversation with uh, ChatGPT about this issue?
No.
Like, like I began, like you said, like that step by step about the money creation and that it's theft, and it agreed on everything. That the printing of money by giving out a loan is a kind of theft of the holders of money, etc., etc. And then, when it came to prices and deflation and why is that happening, it totally said, as you said, uh, that prices have to be higher, otherwise people will we will have deflation and we have a big problem in economy and disaster.
Yeah.
It,
This is
it did
their
not want any in any way be convinced of, and this shows how deep this deception, uh, how deep its work roots are.
yeah. Yeah. And well, and the thing is, if you think about why would everyone be so eager to push this narrative around that this is good, it's healthy, this is what we need, otherwise people won't buy things, otherwise we need it to stimulate growth, right? Like
Yeah.
growth for the sake of growth is somehow beneficial to anyone. um
Mhm.
you know, you have to go back to those incentives that I was describing, right? If every business owner or the majority of business owners are funding their business venture through debt, through interest bearing riba debt, and they are constantly under pressure to pay back that interest, there we already saw what it did to their incentives at the entrepreneur level, the business owner level, the customer level. But we talked about what happens on a sound money, on a true capitalist form, a capitalist process of production, and that happens with lowering costs over time, with reducing the time preference of society over time. Okay, that's the incentives on that side of things. The incentives on this side of things now are, well, if I've borrowed £50,000 and there's 10,000 and there's 10% interest, I owe £5,000 of interest. It will be a lot easier for me to pay all of that back if the money just loses value a bit every single year, right? You know, so when you have an entire society funded by debt, and we know that it's not just the businesses, this is inevitable. This is not necessarily even because people are just choosing to fund themselves by debt. It's kind of it is embedded into the system because the money, as we discussed at the start, comes into existence in the form of debt as loans. This is the only way money comes into existence in this system. So it's not necessarily that people are deliberately choosing to engage in riba and in debt. It's kind of just the default. Like it's much harder to step away from that and forego it than I could. Then I don't want to make it out like this is an easy choice for people to make and they're just choosing the wrong choice. I'm just trying to paint out the reality for people and understand the incentives and how the incentives affect everyone from the bottom up. So now you have an entire society of people who actually, in order to keep their necks above water, they need prices to keep rising. They need the value of money to keep falling so that they can keep paying back their debt obligations. And when that is the incentive of everyone, you know, everyone is going to be willing to turn a blind eye to the truth of the fact of what's really happening here, which is theft, which is riba, which is all of the things that are completely against our beliefs as Muslims. That even Muslims will turn a blind eye to this because this is the architecture of this system. It is built in a way where everyone is consumed by it, and the incentives of it are extremely strong. They're really, really strong because ultimately you're incentivized to turn a blind eye to this stuff, to just let it kind of carry on because actually, you know, if it all fell apart, you'd probably be screwed. You know, you'd probably be screwed because you took on some debt. You funded a business venture through some debt. Maybe you're leveraged up. You've bought more things than you can actually afford because rather than foregoing consumption and saving for things, you've opted for different things. You've opted for credit cards. You've turned into just a consumer, just a non-top consumer. And for the consumer, for the person who has consumed more than they should reasonably have consumed, this system is what keeps them going.
Mhm.
Right? So what can you do? This is it, end to end, right? And I want to bring so I want to now circle this back to the question that you just asked there at the end, which was, why is Bitcoin sound money? Right? As well as answering that, why is Bitcoin sound money? I want to bring it. I'll start with that, and then I want to bring it back to just showing people how clearly important this is to Muslims, right? So Bitcoin is sound money because it is the polar opposite of fiat money. Fiat money is broken money. It is soft money. There are groups of people in our society who can just create more of it. And they don't have to turn on a printer. They don't actually have to exert themselves physically in any way. They just literally type a few keys into a keyboard, they hit enter, and all of a sudden they have created new money. And if you want to look at how they do that, just go and look back at the pandemic, and you can go and see how they created. The US alone was, what was it? Was it 6 trillion? Was it 6 trillion? I believe it. The numbers were astronomical. It was like it is beyond belief the amount that was created. I don't think it was 6 trillion in the US. I believe it may have been 3 trillion, or there's at least 3 trillion of that money still stuck in their banking system is banking
About
with them
half of like worldwide, I think it's about half or 40%
of money in
what
circulation.
has ever been created in
Yeah.
history, but only in few years they
Yes.
created so much.
Yeah.
It's,
It was an astronomical amount of money. And if you look at it, even compared to what they did in 2008, if you look at it compared to what they did in all the previous times that they've gone through big rounds of money printing, it makes everything else look like a drop in the ocean, right? So and this is what happens when so as we've seen, sound money is money that holds its value over time. Okay. Now, what does it actually mean for a money to hold its value? Right. What we've seen is that fiat money definitely doesn't hold its value. Money that can be created more of, if we remember, the quantity of money is going up, the number of goods and services are staying here. That just means the goods and services have to get more expensive. It means it becomes incredibly hard. You can't save for the future. This is why people can't afford homes without mortgages, why people can't even get a car without some kind of financing agreement, because it's incredibly difficult to save up for anything that you want, because the value of your money is just going down and the cost of everything else is going up. This is what happens on soft money, on unsound money. Now, why is Bitcoin sound money? Why is it hard money? Why does it hold its value? And what you have to, it's quite simply a matter of supply and demand, which is a very basic economic concept. Okay, the supply of a money must be the thing. Basically, if goods and services increase in supply faster than the money, then that money is going to buy you more goods and services. That's quite simply how it is. So even if you did, let's say we even had fiat currencies that increased by 6, 7, 8% a year, the quantity. But if goods and services were actually increasing by 10% a year, you would actually be getting, your purchasing power would be increasing. You could actually say then that you do have some quite sound money in comparison to goods and services, because that's what it's all relative to. It's how much does the supply of that money increase versus the supply of goods and services. Okay. Now, gold has always increased on average about 2% a year. So what it's done, gold over history, has that's basically been about the rate at which the goods and services increases. And that has meant that they've pretty much increased in tandem. A lot of the time, the goods and services have increased a bit more. Productivity booms, they cause it to go up faster than gold, you know. But generally, gold has held its value for centuries. It will buy you roughly the same thing that it did today 1,000 years ago. You know, it has the same purchasing power. Okay. Now, that comes from a few properties, scarcity being the main one. Scarcity ensures that that people can't create more of it. It's hard to create more of. It means that you own a certain amount, and you know that certain amount relative to everything else in the economy, goods and services, is going to be pretty close to what it was when you first decided to save it. There's other properties that make it a sound money, but fundamentally they all come down to scarcity. But something can, if something is going to be scarce, that obviously gives it value compared to everything else around it that is not scarce. But you have to be able to take that scarcity into the future. It has to be able to be durable so that it can last into the future, and it has to be easy to transport across time, so easy to hold into the future, and it has to be easy to move from place to place so that you can take it to go and actually use it to exchange for things. Okay, these are all properties of a good sound money.
Mm.
Gold had all of those properties, and gold did a fantastic job for preserving purchasing power for centuries for people. And this is why gold was the money of Islamic societies. Okay, Bitcoin has all of these properties, and that is quite simply all it is. Was deliberately engineered in a way that tried to mimic the properties of sound money, to create digital scarcity, which had never existed before Bitcoin existed, to be easy to transport anywhere in the world. I can take the 12 words in my head and I can go to any country in the world and I have my wealth with me. It's easy to transport across time. I can take the 12 words into the future at zero cost. It costs me nothing to take Bitcoin all the way across the world. It costs me nothing to take Bitcoin 20 years into the future. Okay, you have all of these properties that essentially what they do is they ensure that Bitcoin as a monetary unit, that if you store your economic energy in it, its supply is not going to change, which means that goods and services that get produced, they're going to just get cheaper over time. Everything is going to fall in price against Bitcoin because Bitcoin's supply can never change. It will only ever be 21 million coins. And if people want to understand how it remains at 20, how we know that it will only be able to be 21 million coins, that's probably a whole nother discussion in itself that inshallah we will have. We'll have many more conversations like that at the Muslim Bitcoin Summit in October in London as well,
Yeah.
inshallah. But um, I would encourage people to come and learn about that stuff because it sounds, I know it sounds silly for someone to just say yeah, they'll only be able to ever be 21 million coins, and therefore we know that prices are going to fall against it forever. Okay, how do you know it's going to be 21? Like, what's the guarantee here? Believe me, it's guaranteed, and that warrant that deserves a whole dedicated piece in itself, which we don't have the time for right now. But this is ultimately what makes Bitcoin sound money. It's its properties, right? It's its properties. It's its ability to preserve the economic energy stored in it, protect it from debasement. No one can create more of that unit. No one can create more Bitcoin. No one can devalue Bitcoin over
We can
time.
actually maybe in a simple way describe what's going on in Bitcoin and why it's difficult to devalue it, right?
Yeah,
Like the fact that every computer basically can uh, have a part in controlling the network and in a decentralized way, um, and the fact that the white paper that you have behind you
yeah,
uh, uh, ensures mathematically that the properties of Bitcoin and its soundness and the simplicity of this code, um, the, the fact that so many people are running nodes that are uh, making these checks on the Bitcoin network. This all of this is part of why
yeah.
uh, Bitcoin can hold its value
And if
and stays scarce.
yes, and I would encourage every Muslim to go and read the Bitcoin white paper because it will take you 5 to 10 minutes. And if you're confused about any of the things that it says on it, just just Google them or to speak to ChatGPT about them. Have a conversation with it. It's very easy to understand. It's actually so simple that it will frustrate you that that something so simple can produce something so important. And one thing I would like to compare it to for Muslims that I think is just one of the best comparisons is that how do we ensure that the Quran stays preserved through all of these centuries? How have we ensured that it's stayed preserved, that it stays preserved today? How do we ensure that nobody can bring forward a fabricated version of the Quran in any corner of the world ever?
Yeah.
It is because millions, millions, if we talk about all the generations before, millions upon millions of people have memorized the Quran in their mind, right? They know it off by heart. That if they even heard someone utter an incorrect ayah in the Quran, they will know it's wrong and they can stand there and they can correct them on the spot. Okay, this is a decentralized network of consensus. This is all of the Hafiz, all of those Muslims who have memorized the Quran, right? They are participating in a decentralized network of consensus. They all have consensus and agreement on what the one true version of the Quran is. And if anyone ever tried to change it, if one of those people in that network of consensus decided, no, that's not the Fatiha that I know. This is the new Fatiha, right? Then all of those other members of that network, they're going to turn around and they're going to say, no, it's not. We reject that. We know that it's wrong. That is not the Quran. This is the Quran. If you want that, you go over there and you start your own thing. That's not the Quran, right? And that is what this network. If there was a if every single Quran on the face of this earth was burnt, we would still have it preserved in perfection, and no one would be able to suddenly produce a new printed version of it that would suddenly be accepted as the Quran because we have the one that is preserved in this decentralized way. That is how Bitcoin is preserved. That's how the Bitcoin network is preserved. That's how
Exactly.
we, that is how Bitcoin ensures that there can never be more than 21 million, that no one can create more of it, that no transaction can be censored, that no one can stop you using it, no one can double spend, no one can send you one Bitcoin and send someone else the same one Bitcoin because all of these nodes in consensus agree on the rules and they agree on the ledger and they share it and the minute someone tries to contribute something to the network that changes those rules, that changes the supply of 21 million, that changes the emission schedule, i.e. the reward from mining the blocks, that changes any of these things, it gets rejected by the rest of the nodes. And yes, people will give you endless examples of ways that this could be compromised with a 51% attack and various other mechanisms, but there are some very good counter arguments to why that even a 51% attack would be not something of great concern. The economic incentives behind Bitcoin there are such that everyone who runs a node is participating in protecting their wealth, their money, is participating in ensuring the soundness of the money that they want to operate on. And
Mm.
that is very important to people. And you cannot put a price on that. And if that was easy to compromise, believe me, by this point, someone would have changed the consensus rules of Bitcoin. Someone would have increased the supply cap.
Well, yeah, there are, of course, people who tried to change it, and they
Yeah.
ended up with their own crypto
Yes.
shitcoins, right?
Yeah.
And we all see what happened to their coins and what value they have now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they will not be part of another form of it is also language. Like if I decided now that the word house has another meaning than a building where I live in, um, I'm practically creating a new language, and people will not accept it. So
Yes.
it's yeah. So it's also language is one form of like preserving language is also one form of a decentralized bottom-up way uh, to preserve a system or to like the rules of to preserve a set of rules.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And
So,
and and one thing I would like to that is really important for people to understand, and this kind of circles it all back to
mm,
the start, right? Which is, well, why is that? We can now see. Okay, I would hope that anyone listening to this, any Muslim listening to this, who maybe had questions, probably still has loads of questions, and I would tell them, please, please, please come to the summit in October. Inshallah, we'll be able to, you know, dive further into discussion. I welcome people to bring their skepticism and concerns and
questions.
questions, all of it, because it's all about discussion. Okay, like we want to help people understand stuff, but we also want to help. We also want people to feel free to tell us why they think we're wrong. Like I think that's important. You know,
Sure.
trust me, we've heard it a lot. So everyone's got thick skin, right? You know, like can deal with any thoughts that you may have. But I'm hoping from listening to this, when you hear these things explained, is that you see that Bitcoin has properties that make it a sound money that really do ensure that it has that it is able to um, replicate basically what gold did for our ummah for hundreds, if not thousands of years, okay, for a digital age. Because this is all it was ever meant, this is all it's meant to be. But we're not talking about gold in the way that people are used to gold as today, this thing that you just hold, right? We're talking about gold that our ummah used to use as its money. Okay, we're talking about the
Mm.
gold that you exchange in, you trade in, the gold that you use for saving, for spending, for all of it. Okay, this is what Bitcoin is, and it is a sound form of money, just like gold was for our ummah, right? And I'm hoping that what people will have got from going through this explanation is understanding that the importance of sound money, the effects of abandoning sound money, and how all of that ties into what we all know. We all know we're taught in Islam, you know, these important things that all stem from low time preference, from delaying gratification, from these are all so essential in Islam, from fairness in exchange, from just weights and measures, from the prohibition of riba. Okay, all of these things are made easier on a sound money. All of these things, all of these institutions, all of these principles, they are easier to implement, they are easier to maintain, they're all on a sound money. And when you start to abandon that sound money, those things get destroyed. We start indulging in riba. All of these institutions, the waqf, the delaying of gratification, even the process of wanting to start a family, you know, all of these.
Quality of the products.
Exactly.
Like one of the things that I was noticing when you were describing it is that like the soundness of the money and the right measure in the money uh, creates better products, and the unsoundness of money creates unsound products, right? Like they start to engage in shrinkflation, playing with the weight, and all this deception, you know. So this is very interesting how all of it is connected. It's
Yeah.
almost impossible to be uh, uh, um, not engaged in riba within the system that we live in
Yeah,
now. Um,
it
it's all connected.
it is basically impossible. The hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he talks about how, I can't remember the hadith word for word, but it's along the lines of riba will become so prevalent that even the one who doesn't engage in it will be inflicted by its dust. And this
Yeah,
is what we have today.
this
Subhanallah,
is
is everywhere. It's in every corner of your life without even realizing. You're not consenting to this. Most people don't even realize, but this is the reality of it. And even if it's not in within a product or a thing or a financial instrument that you're interacting with directly, it you are feeling the effects of it in some way because of those compounding effects that it has on everything, on those layers and layers and layers over time of riba and what it does. And
yeah.
I think also it's important to say that I don't want it to appear like it's very important that earlier when we were talking about capitalism, I really urge Muslims when they hear these conversations, do not think of capitalism as what you see in America, what you see in the United Kingdom, what you see in any of these modern Western nations. This is not this is not what we're talking about. We are purely talking about the textbook definition of the capitalistic method of production. It's a very, very specific thing. This is what capitalism is. The name has been hijacked, just like the names of many things have been hijacked. And what people label it as today is not what it is. And also, it's not to claim that just because you have sound money and you have a society that generally lowers its time preference, that all of a sudden every member of society is going to be a great human being, and that they're not going to engage in riba, and that they're not going to do theft, and that they're not going to do bad things, and they're not going to engage in riba, in zina and other short term pleasures. People are going to do that, right? Especially in places that are devoid of any kind of moral compass, who lack faith. This is You're going to get that, you know, and this is so I don't want to make this into some kind of fairy tale. It's absolutely not, you know.
But
Bad things will always happen, people will always engage in bad behaviors, but
not
ultimately
on that scale that we have now.
this is it's
And
what does
then,
it incentivize at scale.
yeah, and then, uh, like, why are Bitcoin, Muslim Bitcoiners, so energized by Bitcoin, are so enthusiastic about it? Is because a lot of us were seeing that so many problems that we have in our economy and society uh, are connected to the monetary system. I find this is a common thing among Bitcoiners, like in the Bitcoin Majlis, for example. A lot of people were coming from this background. They were seeing a problem in the monetary system, and Bitcoin answered a lot of their questions and provided solutions for the concerns that they had. So we, like, a lot of us, of course, are happy about the wealth preservation and wealth growth that Bitcoin provided for us, but we are also coming from another angle, that we see problems in the society and we want to find solutions for them, and that's why like Bitcoin provides for us like a base ground that's sound and strong to build upon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
inshallah.
and I hope we in the next coming summit in October in London, we will be providing these solutions that Muslims need, that Muslim communities need everywhere. Uh,
Inshallah. Yeah. And I think you get more and more energized about it as a Muslim the more time you spend
yeah,
learning about things, because I didn't there's so many things that I didn't really know much about in Islam until I started learning about sound money, Bitcoin, a bit more. And this is where I started to learn about the system of Qadr Hassan, the system of the Waqf, the um, all of these things in Islam. Alhamdulillah, they're beautiful, and you just start to realize that how are we meant to live true to these things within this system currently? They are not compatible. Okay,
No,
they are just not compatible. This is a system of theft and extraction for everyone, not just Muslims. It does it to all of us, but uniquely for us, you know, it is a direct attack on all of these institutions and principles that we're meant to hold dear. And I would even question, like, these are things that do not pop up in conversation a lot. Like, I've never really heard many khutbas about riba, about waqf, about Qad Hassan. Very rarely have I heard these things be spoken about. It's only really once you get into um, learn you have to approach this with intent of actually learning what does our religion say about money and finances and economics and conduct in trade and commerce. Like, that's when you start to really get the understand the importance of these things, and you start to appreciate how amazing these things are, and how much they can help not just Muslims but all of society. So this is why you get more energized by it, because you see, like, you suddenly you start to have this hope that, are we going to be able to revive these things? Like, are we going to be able to harness this tool and start to rebuild these things? And
exactly.
inshallah we will.
Inshallah. So looking forward for the meeting and for the questions that people have, and that we
Yeah.
provide the solutions not only about money, because also the Bitcoin community has built a lot of tools for communication, for uh, apps and solutions for so many aspects of our life.
Yeah.
And yeah, it would be great to that more people, more Muslims know about them.
Yeah, there's so much here for people to see that is
Yeah,
happening, that I'm like nowhere near where I need to be on adopting this stuff, but there is a whole nother system being built here that, no illusion, it's not nice and comfortable to adopt. Like, you have to like um struggle with it
like
and learn it a bit, and you do have to forego some comforts, but what is on the other side is is sovereignty as an ummah, and
yeah,
I just think that's so important.
for sure. So inshallah, we have a good meeting, and I'm looking
Inshallah.
forward to seeing you, and
Yeah,
we make
looking forward to
more
seeing
content,
you.
inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair.